Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Today we are back with another objection that has been leveled against Ustaz Javed Ahmed Ghamidi. We will try to present his answer to this objection. So basically, there are four questions that arise on this view of Ustaz Ghamidi regarding Islam and state. The first of them relates to Amr bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar. The second relates to Iqamat-e-Deen. The third relates to the concept of Al-Jama'ah. And the fourth relates to the concept of Khilafah. And we will inshallah discuss each of these concepts one by one. So Ustaz Ghamidi says that Islamic Sharia actually contains two distinct categories of directives. The first category comprises directives which are given to the individuals, and the second which actually relate to the society. Now the first category relates to directives which are between an individual and God. In these directives, a person is not responsible to any government. On the contrary, he is responsible to God solely. So no government, for example, can force a person to fast or go for Hajj or Umrah, or to circumcise himself, or to keep his moustaches trimmed, or in the case of a woman, to cover her chest, refrain from displaying her ornaments, or to wear a scarf when going out. In such matters, a government has no authority beyond urging and educating people, except if there is a chance of rights being usurped or excesses being committed against the life, wealth, and honor of people. The Quran has explicitly stated that among the positive directives of religion, a state can only forcibly demand them or the citizens to offer their prayer and to pay zakat. So the Quran has said that after this, it is incumbent upon the state to leave them alone. So the Quranic words are فَخَلُّوا سَبِيلَهُم. They should not be tampered with, and nothing should be enforced upon them. Now, as far as the second category of directives is concerned, they are given only to a government, because it is a government which represents a society in its collective affairs. If religious scholars demand from those in authority to obey them, then they certainly will be justified. In fact, it is their duty in their capacity as scholars to make such a demand. It should be clear that this demand is the demand to follow the Sharia. Implementation of the Sharia is not the right name for this demand. This second category comprises certain directives, and Ustaz Ghamidi has enumerated them. The first of them is Muslims will not be subjects of their rulers, but they will be equal citizens. No discrimination shall be made between them in the state system and the laws of the state. Their life, wealth, and honor shall hold sanctity. So much so that without their consent, the state shall not impose any tax on them other than zakat. If a dispute arises in their personal affairs like marriage, divorce, distribution of inheritance, and other similar matters, it shall be decided in accordance with the Islamic Sharia. They shall be provided with all the essential facilities for their daily prayers, the fasts of Ramadan, and Hajj and Umrah. They will not be forced by the law to submit to any directive which reflects a positive injunction of Islam, except, as we just mentioned, the prayer and zakat. They will be governed with justice and fairness on the principle of amruhum shura bainahum, which means the affairs of the Muslims are run on the basis of their consultation. Their public wealth and assets shall be reserved for collective needs of the society and shall not be given in private ownership. In fact, they shall be developed and looked after in such a way that the needs of people who are not able to financially support themselves are fulfilled from their income. If they pass away, they shall be enshrouded and prepared for burial according to the Muslim rites. Their funeral prayer shall be offered, and they shall be buried in the graveyard of the Muslims, the way Muslims are buried. The second point that Ustaz Ghamidi has enumerated in this regard is that it shall be the responsibility of the government to organize the Friday and the Eid prayers. These prayers shall be held only at places which are specified by the state. Their pulpits shall be reserved for the rulers. They themselves will lead and deliver the sermon of these prayers, or some representative of theirs will fulfill this responsibility on their behalf. Within the confines of the state, no one will have the authority to organize these prayers independently. The third obligation which Ustaz Ghamidi has enumerated regarding the state is that law enforcing departments shall be primarily reserved for Amr bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar. We know that these are two terms of the Quran, and they refer to enjoining what is good, what is Maruf, and forbidding what is Munkar, what is evil. So the most pious of people will be selected as workers of these departments. They will urge people to do good and forbid them all what mankind has always regarded as evil. But they will only use the force of law when a person is guilty of usurping rights or goes after the life, wealth, and honor of people. The fourth thing in this regard, which Ustaz Ghamidi has mentioned, is that the state shall always adhere to justice, which is qaim bil qist, with regard to its enemies as well. It will speak the truth, bear witness to it, or not take any step contrary to justice and fairness. The fifth point is that if the state enters into agreement with someone within its jurisdiction or with some foreign entity, then as long as the agreement exists, it shall be honored both in letter and in spirit with full honesty and sincerity. The sixth thing which is mentioned in this regard is that the death penalty will be given in two cases only. First, murder, and second, spreading anarchy in the land. If a Muslim is guilty of murder, theft, fornication, falsely accusing someone of fornication, which is called qazf, or spreading anarchy and disorder in the land, and a court is fully satisfied that he does not deserve any leniency arising from his personal, familial, and social circumstances, then those punishments shall be meted out to him which the Almighty has prescribed in His book for those who have wholeheartedly accepted the call of Islam. The seventh thing in this regard, which Ustaz Ghamidi has mentioned vis-a-vis the state, is that dissemination of Islam to all parts of this world shall be organized at the state level. If any power of the world tries to hinder this effort or persecute Muslims, then the state, according to its capacity, will try to remove this hindrance and stop this persecution, even if it has to resort to force. Now, the next question which arises is that what is to be done if the state is not acting according to the dictates of religion? So, the directives of Sharia which relate to the state and have been given with the warning that those who do not accept the verdict of the book of God after acknowledging them will be regarded as zalim, which means wrongdoers, fasik or defiant, and kafir, which means disbelievers. This is what their titles will be on the day of judgment. But if the rulers of the Muslims, in spite of this warning, are guilty of some error in this regard or become rebellious, then the only responsibility of religious scholars is to warn them of its consequences in this world and the hereafter. With wisdom and kindly exhortation, they should call them to mend their ways, face their questions, dispel their doubts, and logically reason with them as to why God has given them this Sharia. They should explain to them its relevance in the collective sphere of life. They should also elucidate to them the basis of its directives and the difficulty which a person of the modern era faces in understanding it. They should adopt styles and ways to explain and clarify it so that its underlying wisdom and objective becomes evident to them, and their hearts and minds are able to adopt it with full satisfaction, and they become prepared to follow it. The Quran has stated that the real status of religious scholars is to invite people to the truth and warn them about any deviation from it. God does not want them to force people to follow Islam or to organize their followers in groups that ask people at gunpoint to follow the Sharia. Now, as far as the responsibility of the common man or the common person is concerned, the Quran is absolutely clear about it. It is called nusra, or help, helping people for the cause of God, supporting people for the cause of God. So now we come to three other questions which arise actually on the state authorities and the sphere of the obligation of the state, because directive of Amr bil Maruf is something which is mentioned, and it is said that because of this directive a state can impose its will forcibly regarding the Maruf and regarding the Munkar. So this first question is answered by Ustaz Ghamidi by saying that as far as the word Maruf and Munkar are mentioned, they do not relate to any religious directive. They relate to universal good and universal evil. So Maruf is something which relates to universal good, and Munkar is something which relates to universal evil, which means things which are universally acceptable are maruf and things which are universally unacceptable are munkar. So we have to also understand, as Ustaz Ghamidi has put forth, that the word amr does not always mean to enforce something. It also has the meaning of suggestion. It also has the meaning of teaching. It also has the meaning of urging and exhorting other people. So Amr bin Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar, it should be understood, as Ustaz Ghamidi says, that it never relates to religious right or wrong. It relates to universally acceptable things which are right or wrong. And that is something very important because it does not relate to Sharia.
As far as what is related to the state is concerned,
Ustaz Ghamidi says that is mentioned in verse 104 of Surah Al-Imran, which says, وَلْتَكُمْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. And let there be appointed among you some people who call towards righteousness, urge towards virtue and forbid evil. Diligently arrange for this and remember that those who do so shall only attain success. So this directive is given to the Muslims in their collective capacity. It's not an individual directive, it's given to them in their collective capacity. In order to hold fast to this directive of the Quran, they must depute some people from among themselves to enjoin good and forbid evil. It is in this capacity that glad tidings of success are given. It is evident from this that this directive relates to those in authority. It does not relate to an individual as far as this particular verse is concerned. Thus, in an Islamic state, the pulpit of the Friday prayer and the Department of Police serve this very purpose, according to Ustaz Ghamidi. Through the Friday sermon, those in authority call them towards righteousness and urge them to refrain from wrongdoings, while the police holds people accountable who perpetrate acts which are considered as crimes as per the law. Now, Ustaz Ghamidi says that there is another verse which might be a cause of confusion, so he also discusses that, and this is actually verse 110 of Surah Al-Imran. It says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. Believers, with the blessing of God, at this time you are an excellent group. So this is referring to the companions and through the times of the Prophet. You are an excellent group, raised up to bear witness to the truth before people. You urge towards virtue, forbid vice, and have true belief in God. So as far as this particular verse is concerned, this actually relates to the personal capacity. Each individual is required to urge people to what is right. And as I said, maruf is something which is universally accepted to be maruf, like for example, justice, fairness, honesty. So this is something that we term as maruf, and munkar is something that is the opposite to it, for injustice, to lie, to extort. So all these are universally evil things, and that is what this verse mentions, that in your own personal capacity you must urge people to do what is universally good or stop them from doing what is wrong. Now, Ustaz Ghamidi has said that there is a narrative of the Prophet which has caused some confusion in the minds of many people, and they think that as per this narrative, it invokes or gives the authority to people to forcibly implement what they think is maruf. So, first of all, it has to be understood that this narrative is about the circle of authority, in the circle of authority in which the Prophet has directed Muslims to try to curb any evil if they see it, not beyond the circle of authority. And the words of this narrative, this is a very famous narrative, we know, and it is often quoted, are Man ra'a minkum munkaran فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. Which means that when any person among you sees an evil in his circle of authority, he should try to curb it by the force of his hands. If he does not have the faith to do it, he should try to curb it by his tongue. And if even this is not possible, he should consider it bad in his heart. And this is the lowest level of faith. Now, the words which have caused this confusion, فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ, which means if he does not have the strength, they do not refer to physical strength or the strength of resources which make a person liable to follow some directive. They in fact refer to one's courage, whose source is one's faith. So, إِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ does not mean that you use force, physical force, if you're not you don't have the capacity to use physical force. It actually refers to the fact that you don't have courage to stop it. Then we have to understand that the foremost responsibility of a person in his circle of authority is to curb evil by force unless some religious expediency is attached to it. To curb evil or munkar by the tongue is the second level of faith, and the last level is that a person should at least consider it to be evil in his heart. If he does not even have this feeling, then it means that he has become totally devoid of faith. So Ustaz Ghamidi says that if this narrative is reflected upon in the light of the Quran, its correct understanding is one in which he has shown that if in the circle of authority a person sees something universally evil, then the highest level of faith is that he should have the courage to stop it forcibly in his circle of authority, not going to other places, not going to other houses, not going to the university concerts or places where you are going to stop people from forcibly doing what you think is not right. So less than this, whatever action they take shall indeed be a show of their weak faith. However, if they venture to use force outside their circle of authority, then this is the worst kind of disorder or anarchy that they can create. Such measures have no place in religion. And the Quran is absolutely clear in this regard, that as a preacher, no messenger of God was ever given the authority beyond reminding and lucidly presenting religion. So the Quran at one instance says, إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُزَكِّرْ لَسْتَ عَلَيْهِمْ بِمُسَيْطِرٍ. Your duty is only to remind them. You are not to force them. So if we understand this, we can clearly see that a state does not have the authority, for example, to force its citizens, Muslim male citizens, to keep a beard, or female citizens, for example, to wear the hijab. Similarly, it cannot ostracize them and declare them to be kafir or do their takfir. This is basically a summary of Ustaz Ghamidi's view regarding Amr bil Maruf and Nahi anil Munkar, and you can clearly see it is a concept that is very nuanced, and it is a concept in which state authorities, if involved, then how they have to behave. And as far as individuals are concerned, as far as they are concerned, then it is only in their own circle of authority in which they are given the authority or the prerogative to curb evil by force. We have three more concepts in this regard that we will be discussing: Aqamat-e-Deen, Al-Jamara and Khilafa in our remaining episodes, and we will inshallah cover them.